Part 3. We're getting there. Beachhead. Beachhead is a pretty unique game. It's sort of a series of mini-games that follow a sequence. Your objective is to bring a fleet of ships to an enemy base and destroy it. You start with 10 ships, which function sort of like lives. The first optional mission is to take your fleet through a hidden passage to try to take the enemy fleet by surprise. You need to navigate your ships through this sort of maze of mines and torpedoes. It's risky because you can lose ships that you'll really need later. However, if you succeed, it makes the next mission easier as the enemy is unprepared. It's pretty unusual to have an optional bonus stage as the very first stage. Next, as you navigate towards the land, the enemy fleet intercepts you and attacks you with jets. You control anti-aircraft cannons and have to shoot them out of the sky. When the planes are dealt with, you have the enemy fleet itself. For this one, you fire a long-range cannon that you have to angle just right to be able to hit the ships at different distances. The best way to gauge if you're firing at too high or too low an angle is to watch the splashes when your shots land. If you don't see a splash, you shot too far. If you do see one, it's too close. When you score a direct hit against a ship, it will sink. Once the enemy ships are defeated, you arrive at the beachhead. Every ship that has survived this long provides you with 2 tanks. This is your final life counter. The ships are no longer important. It's all tanks from here on out. You drive through a series of obstacles until you reach the boss, which is a giant cannon. You have to hit all of its various weak spots in a specific order to destroy the cannon before it can aim and fire. It's the same mechanic as the ship battle, but faster paced, and you have a very short time limit. If you don't destroy it in time, it will still remain damaged for your next tank. However, the area you already navigated is now a little bit tougher as the enemy placement has been rearranged, so you can't use the same tactic as before. New enemies are added, but sometimes some are removed, so you just don't know what to expect. When you finally destroy the cannon, your mission has succeeded and you win. It's a fairly simple game, but unique. Le Mans. I mentioned in my previous video how I could have sworn I played both a joystick and a paddle version of Seawolf. It's possible I was actually thinking of Le Mans, since it definitely does have 2 versions. It's a racing game of sorts, but like many early racing games, it doesn't have a set number of opponents that you have to beat. It just generates a bunch of cars as you go, and you get bonuses for passing them. There's also no finish line, you just play until you run out of time. The most striking memories to me about this game are the sounds. Despite the fact that I probably first played this game when I was 3 years old, and pretty much stopped playing it a few years later, I can to this day hear in my head the sound of the countdown. The engine gearing up, the sound of passing cars, the long crashing sound, and the little Doppler effect when you finally run out of time. Despite some cool little features like the headlights turning on when it's dark, there isn't a whole lot to it. It's kind of fun to replay a few times to see how far you can get. Otherwise, I think nostalgia is the only reason I care about it. Raid Over Moscow. Raid Over Moscow is a pretty cool game, but man is it repetitive. The basic premise is that the Soviet Union has launched a nuclear attack on America, and you have to go destroy the missile silos to prevent the nukes from detonating. Like Beachhead, it's sort of like a series of minigames. Actually, it turns out it was by the same developer as Beachhead, so that kind of makes sense. The first phase is to fly your jet out of the hangar. I'm not sure why this is supposed to be a challenge, but it's actually pretty difficult the first few times you play. You need to use the joystick to control the plane, which has no brakes, and will fly right into a wall if you don't turn around and thrust in the opposite direction. And then head for the hangar door, which, why aren't the jets facing the door in the first place? And while you're trying to manage all that, you have to reach the keyboard and press F7 to open the door, but it won't open if you don't have enough altitude, and you need to hit the fire button to lift. There's no way to lower yourself other than to wait it out and let gravity do its thing. The door will also close on its own if you take too long. It's not easy. I kind of love the idea that all-out nuclear war is happening, and the fate of the world is all up to an elite squad of fighter pilots who all die just trying to get out of the hangar. The next phase is to fly to the missile silo and get past the enemy army. Here's where it starts to get repetitive. If you die in this phase, you have to go back and fly another plane out of the hangar. There is a way to avoid that, sort of. Whenever you fly a plane out of the hangar, rather than fly all the way to the city, you do have the option of going back to the hangar to launch another plane. You can repeat as much as you want so you have a larger supply, as long as you have enough reserve planes anyway. This kind of gives you a few extra lives when you arrive at the Soviet city, but it's not like there's an infinite supply back home. It all comes from the same pool of jets. So you basically just have the option of deploying one jet every mission, or doing a whole bunch at once so you have some extra lives. It's just busy work and doesn't necessarily help you other than potentially saving you some time. When you get to the end of the city, you have to destroy this building in the center. You can destroy the other buildings too, but they're not necessary and are only worth going after for extra points. You have to move yourself up and down to line up perfectly with each target. Luckily, the game has your plane change color to let you know you're lined up correctly. Then, after you destroy the building, you win that stage. Then you have to start all over again with the next Russian city. And yes, that means deploying more jets from the hangar. Even if you deployed all your jets from last time, they all get reset and you have to launch every jet all over again. And then you arrive at the next city and it's exactly the same as the other one. There are 4 cities you have to do this with, and they're all completely identical. The only difference is that the last one is Moscow, and after you get to the end, instead of shooting at a bunch of generic buildings, it finally brings you to a new phase, which is blowing up the Kremlin with a bazooka. This part is kind of awesome. I just hate how much repetitive work you have to do to get to what is easily the best part of the game. It does at least do you one solid and automatically deploys all of your jets for the last city, so you don't have to do that whole hangar mess again. Once you've adequately destroyed the whole Kremlin, you go inside the building you just blew up, and then you have to throw explosive frisbees at a robot. And then you win. I never beat the game as a kid and had to do it on an emulator 30 years later, specifically because the copy I had was bugged and would crash whenever I beat the bazooka stage, so I never got to see the robot stage. It's not a bad game overall. If the stages had more variety and you only had to do the hangar segment one time, it would have been a fantastic game. But as it is, I would say it's only okay. I do find it kind of funny that the missiles will take 8 minutes to hit America, but you can fly a series of fighter jets all the way to Russia in seconds. Speed Racer. This game is stupid. Okay, let me specify. There is more than one game for Commodore 64 called Speed Racer. And in case you're curious, neither of them is based on the famous Speed Racer anime. The two games are very different, although they are both car games. So, to be clear, I'm specifically talking about this one with the very amateurish graphics, where you slowly increase in speed, and you have a bunch of random pedestrians walking or standing in the middle of the street. The game is surprisingly violent, as you can run over these people, or dogs, and they turn into a big blood smudge on the road. I actually kind of wish this was based on the anime, because I love the idea of the beloved kids cartoon hero splattering random pedestrians and just continuing on like it's no biggie. But beyond the pointless violence, the really stupid thing is that the game has a mechanic to reward you for both hitting and for avoiding pedestrians. Anytime you run over somebody, it gives you a devilish point, or a horn, and anytime you pass by someone without running them over, it gives you a heavenly point, or a halo. These points don't do anything other than let you keep track of how many you accumulate. So there's not really any difference. If you hit someone, you get a point. If you don't hit them, you get a point. So there's no incentive either to intentionally try to hit people or to do your best to avoid them. It's all the same. Your speed gets faster and faster as you go, and you'll very quickly find out that you don't even really have much of a choice in the matter. People whiz by so fast, it's impossible to intentionally hit or intentionally avoid anyone, and you're being awarded points all the while as if you're doing it on purpose. Avoiding obstacles that destroy your car becomes impossible too, so you're just watching yourself zoom along and then crash. I mean, you can brake and slow down, but the difference between too fast and too slow happens very quickly. So really, you're just choosing between ridiculously fast and painfully slow. One is impossible, and the other is not fun at all. The most fun thing about the game is just minor amusement at how juvenile it is. Hang Math. Oh yeah, I had a bunch of these educational games growing up. This one is like Hangman, but instead of letters, you guess numbers to fill up a mathematical equation. But you can't just guess a numeral and automatically reveal all of them. You need to pick a number and a specific column. So it's actually pretty hard. You have to guess a lot to fill in some of the essential numbers, and then use math to figure out what the missing numbers are. It's kind of a neat idea, although it is kind of frustrating, especially if you're not the sort of person with a lot of patience for doing math equations. Ace of Aces. I mentioned how much of a confusing mess Infiltrator is as a flight simulator. This game is way better. It does have a learning curve, but figuring out what you're doing on your own is something you can actually do. I would still recommend reading the manual first because there is some complexity to the game, but overall this is extremely intuitive. The game takes place in World War II and you fly an RAF Mosquito, which is a combination fighter and bomber. And you can do 4 different missions that allow you to experience both aspects. You may have noticed that the missions are checkboxes, meaning yes, you can do multiple missions at once, even all 4. After you pick a mission, you can load up your plane with the ammunition you think you'll need. It's actually pretty fun loading up all your weapons and hearing the satisfying sound of everything filling up your inventory. If you're not doing a bombing run, you can load up bomb space with extra rockets instead, or if you are doing a bombing run, you can divvy them up as you like. The game has a decent navigation system to help you get to your target, and it simulates different components of your plane getting damaged, and there's even weather. If you come across an enemy fighter on the way to a target, the game stops you from moving on the map so you can deal with a fighter without worrying about being thrown off course. It's overall very clever and well designed. Missile Math. This one I'm somewhat nostalgic for because of the music. It's not really something I would add to my video game soundtrack collection, but it does kind of bring back fond feelings, even though this game is kind of garbage. It's like Space Invaders, but where you fire only one shot, and it only counts if the enemy ship is hovering over the correct answer in a math question. You get multiple tries, but you get just one shot per pass, and you earn less points with each pass. Problem number 1 is that your projectile moves ridiculously slowly, and getting it to line up perfectly with your target is sometimes more challenging than answering the math questions. Problem number 2 is that when the ship first appears, it's already passing right over one of the answers, and if it's the correct answer, you may have already missed your chance to answer correctly while you're trying to work out the problem in your head. The difficulty is wildly inconsistent. You have plenty of time to figure out the answer if the correct answer is at the very left, and no time at all if it's at the very right. If you fail to hit your enemy, or if you answer incorrectly 3 times, the ship slowly flies into you, at which point you have no possible way to dodge. You can only delay the inevitable by running away while it slowly glides into you. It's kind of annoying, especially because it gives you back your missile so you can fire another shot, but it's impossible to hit the enemy. I do not like this game. Beachhead 2. This game kicks so much butt. Yes, it's a sequel to Beachhead, but it's a completely new and different game that's so unique and fun, I'd say it still holds up today. It's a series of mini-games, but unlike the original, they don't have to be played in order. You can choose whichever you want to play. All the games are multiplayer in nature and can be played against another person, or against the computer. Joystick 2 controls the allies, and Joystick 1 controls the dictator. If you play single player, the game will wait to see which joystick you move before the computer takes control of that player's opponent. The first of the games is easily the best one. One player controls a large machine gun turret which kind of resembles the end boss of the first game. The other player controls an army. The first player's objective is to kill as many soldiers as possible, and the second player's objective is to escort the soldiers safely past the turret through a number of different phases. First, the helicopter phase, where they have to try and drop the troops in such a way to try and avoid getting shot. It often helps to try and draw enemy fire towards some of your troops to successfully airdrop more, and sometimes that means sacrificing some to ensure the safety of others. Once all the soldiers are deployed, the helicopter takes off, and the player now has to time the soldiers sprinting to the next wall.
Follow me, man! Medic!
In the final segment, you can have up to 2 soldiers run out from the wall, either by making a break through the opening in the middle, or climbing over the side of the wall. It's often a good idea to do both to give the turret more targets to divide its focus. Also, one of the soldiers has a grenade, and if you can get lined up and survive long enough to throw it, you can blow up the turret to get a massive point bonus. Every time the turret is destroyed, it's just replaced with a new turret. Whichever player has the most points wins. The turret has an early game advantage where they can gain lots of points for gunning down lots of soldiers, but the final phase is really where the game gets intense, and you rarely know who's going to win until the bitter end. The second game is similar, but the player with the turret has an escort mission. Their job is to protect a single person, which the other player will be trying to kill with a variety of measures. They can deploy landmines, drop heavy rocks from a wall above, nail him in a drive-by shooting, or run over him with a tank. The turret can easily shoot any of these hazards, so timing is everything. This one isn't as fun as the first game, but it has a lot of personality. I love how if you shoot the guy you're supposed to protect, the guy stops to yell at you. Hey, don't shoot me! I also found the sound he makes if he gets run over by a tank to be really gruesome sounding. This was actually the same sound effect used in Impossible Mission, which had different developers. They use the same voice generation software, so maybe that's just a sound that comes bundled with it. For some reason, it just sounds silly in Impossible Mission, but sounds horrifying in this one. I guess it's just a matter of context. The third minigame is kind of a shoot 'em up, which doesn't really work as a multiplayer game, at least not in the same way as the others. If you play single player, you can only control the helicopter, whether or not you're playing as the Allies or the Dictator. If you play as a two-player game, one player controls the helicopter, and the other player can kind of manipulate the defenses. It's a little more confusing and less fun than the other 3 games. I never bother with it. The final minigame is a knife-throwing match between a hero and the evil Dictator. Most of the fun of this one just comes from the voice samples the villain uses, but it's still a pretty good time. Okay, thanks for watching part 3. Part 4 is next.